Okay, so since the 4.76 Sony update, a lot of people have been asking me for auto patches. Now, I tell everyone that you don't need to patch it to the version that it's on. You can just patch it to 355 because essentially the patches are exactly the same. The only reason that the PS3 turns on and goes to XMB is because the ROS 0 and the ROS 1 match the version that the PS3 was on before. If that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about that. I'm sure you'll learn that as you go along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to go through the downgrade process, and then I'm going to show you how to patch it the way I do, which means that you can patch any version exactly the same. So whether it's 3.60 or 4.0 or 476 or even 9.99, you can patch any version exactly the same way as this, and it will always come up with the end result. Only recommend using this patching method with Nor consoles, because when you do it with NAND consoles, the outcome's slightly different. But that's another time for another video. So what you want to do is you want to strip down your PS3. You don't need the Blu-ray drive, and you don't need the hard drive plugged in at the moment. You only need those when you need to actually update the PS3. You don't need those while you're using the E3 flasher. So if you turn your console on, so turn the PS3 on, and you want to take your orange clip and you want to put the orange clip onto the Nor chip. And then you want to plug it into the actual E3 flasher itself, or you can do it the other way around. It's entirely up to you, as long as you've got the clip cable plugged into the E3 flasher, that's fine. So so what I normally do is I normally, because I don't really like messing around with them, I normally put the clip onto the Nor chip, and then I normally just clamp it down straight away. It will then take a dump first time, and it will be a good dump, and it normally minimises on problems. If you try and take a dump of the E3 like this, you have to have a little bit of luck, but you also have to have a nice newish clip, or one that hasn't been through the wars, and the Nor chip needs to be perfectly straight. Now, when the Nor chips are soldered onto the motherboard in the factory, when Sony make the boards, some of the Nor chips get soldered on slightly crooked, off centre, so it's hard for the clip to actually sit onto the top of the Nor chip like properly. So that's why I always just clamp them down, because it causes less problems. But anyway, so when you first get an E3 flasher, first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the Samsung update, which I'll leave a link in the description for. You're going to want to take that file, drag it onto your SD card in your PC or laptop, and then put your SD card into the E3 flasher, obviously in the clip cage where it goes. And you're going to want to have the first two lights up, and then you're going to want to press the top red button here, and then that will start updating the E3 flasher itself. It's been a while since I've done it, but I'm pretty sure that the blue lights will come on one by one, and then when it gets to the end, the blue lights will then move side to side again to let you know that it's finished. If you take the SD card out of the E3 flasher, put it back into your PC or laptop, the Samsung update should have disappeared off the SD card. So the E3 flasher takes the Samsung update off the SD card and puts it onto the E3 flasher. So once the E3 flasher's updated, I'm going to make sure you got your SD card in the cage. So what you want to do to start taking a read of the PS3 is you want to flick the third light up, or the third switch, so that the third light is up. Now, what I normally do is I normally just clamp it down so that it causes less problems. I mean, you don't have to clamp it down. You know, you can. Sometimes you don't need to clamp it. You know, with a lot of fat models, you don't need to clamp it, but you know, it just causes less problems. So, I mean, you can use any clamp, but what you want to remember is you don't want to put too much pressure onto the top of the clip, because if you put too much pressure, you could bend the legs of the clip, or you could, even worse, damage the legs on the Nor chip itself. So, okay, so you want the third light up on the E3 flasher, or the third switch, and then just want to press the top red button and that will start reading. So what I'm going to do is, when that's finished reading, I'll move over to the laptop or PC and I'll show you how to check the dump and then patch it, and then we'll go back to flash it back. Okay, so I've plugged my SD card into my laptop and it's come up here. I called my SD card E3 flasher. So as you can see on the desktop, I've got a folder called Nor Check. I'll put a link to the download for that in the description. So what you want to do is make a new folder. I'll call this my PS3. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the bkpps3.bin and you're going to want to drag and drop it into this folder on the desktop. PC is a little bit slow because it's waiting for updates. Then once that's copied over, you're going to want to delete these off the SD card. That's it. So I'll just keep this down here. In fact, I'll close it up. Right, so we've got this folder called PS3, my PS3, and that's got the dump from the PS3 on. And then we've got the Nor Check folder. So I'll put as I said, I'll put a link for this in the description. So inside the Nor Check folder will be Nor Inspector, Dump Statistic, and a folder called Patch. Now the folder called Patch is just Dump Statistics Patch, so Dump Statistic has always got to be in the same folder as Patch, but that's not a problem, just leave everything in here. So first thing you want to do is you want to open up Nor Inspector. Once you've got Nor Inspector open, you want to take your bkpps3 and just drag it over and drop it into there. And then that will give you all the information. It will tell you what version it's on from XMB, what version it's on from safe mode. It'll give you its lowest downgrade. It will give you all the details. So the important thing in here is if you come over to the status, or status, however, and then you want to have a look at all the regions, and you want to scroll down, and you want to make sure that all these regions are green and say OK. If any of the regions are red, then that means it's a bad dump. So as you can see, like every region in here is okay. So that's a good dump, that is. However, you don't just want to take one program's word for it, because you might end up bricking your PS3. So if you open up Dump Statistic and then take your bkpps3 file and drag it over into the input and then drop it into this input box here, give it a second, and then as you can see it says no errors found. If there are any errors found, it will tell you that there's either no brick risk, or it will tell you, basically if it says no errors found, then that's all good, or if it says no brick risk, that's all good. But if it brings up a lot of errors, then you know there's a problem going on. However, all the information's there, all the metloader and bootloader information, the EID keys are there, CID, metloader, bootloader again, even the hard drive info. Basically it's got all its data. It looks like a good dump, and it said no errors found. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come over here to where it says output and where it says choose patch. Click on the drop down box and select 3.55 or ROS 355, and then select patched E3 flasher, so that will patch it in the style of an E3 flasher dump. Then you want to take your bkpps3.bin again, and you want to drag it over into the square again where it says input, drop it into there. It'll check it again and it will just confirm that there were no errors found, and then it will leave this file here, which is bkpps3 patched e3.bin. So what I normally do is make a folder and just call it original, so you know that that's your original dump from your PS3, and then you want to put that in there, and then I'll make another folder called patched, and then you can drag both the dump and the E3 into the patched. Then open up the patched folder. Right, so you want to rename this dump, because for the E3 to read it, for the E3 flasher to read it, it has to be called bkpps3.bin. So you just want to basically delete, oh, that's Windows 10 that is, that's because I'm not used to it. Right, okay, original, there we go, no, into patched. Right, so what you want to do is go to rename, and then delete that so that it's just bkpps3.bin, and then if you right click it and then select send to, and then send it to your SD card, or you can just copy it over, it's entirely up to you. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to the PS3 and I'll show you how to flash it back to the PS3. So once you've put your patched bkpps3 file back onto the SD card, you're going to put the SD card back into the cage, into the TF cover board. Then you want to flick this switch down so that all switches are down, and what that will do is that will mean that you'll be writing back to the PS3. So once you've got all those switches down and you press the red start button, obviously the lights will disappear, and then it will start to move up one light at a time. It normally takes about a minute for it to take a read, and then it normally takes around about, I don't know, 7 to 8 minutes for it to flash back to the PS3 or write back to the PS3. So what I'll do is I'll let it finish writing back to the PS3, and then I'll put the hard drive and the Blu-ray back on, and I'll put the TV on, and I'll show you what you want to do next after you've flashed it back to the PS3. Okay, so before I carry on with the downgrade process, I just wanted to go through a couple of things. First being, when you try and install custom firmware over the top of official firmware, what'll happen is it'll give you an update error. That's because the security on the PS3 won't let you install custom firmware. So when you use the E3 flasher, what you're doing is you're basically disabling the security on the PS3 to allow you to install custom firmware. Now, some people will flash a PS3, say for example if it's on 4.70 custom firmware, some people will flash it and then they'll install 4.70 custom firmware straight onto it, and then they'll enable QA flag, and then that'll be the end of it. However, if you do that, later on down the line it does cause problems, like when it comes time to downgrade, or you know, various other bits and pieces. I don't want to get into it too much right now, but I always recommend, once you've flashed a PS3, to downgrade it to 355. Then you can toggle QA, which is a permanent effect on the PlayStation, and then that's lasting then, so you only have to toggle a PS3 once in its lifetime and it's done. And obviously at the moment you can only run toggle QA on 355. So first thing you want to do is you want to get yourself Ruggiero 999 downgrader. So I'll put a link to that 355 Meow and the toggle QA package in the description. I'll put links to those in the description. So once you've flashed the PS3 with the E3 flasher, if you put the hard drive back in, put the Blu-ray back on. I don't normally put the whole PlayStation back together, just in case. You never know, something might go wrong, you might need to reflash it, you know, you never know. So I never put them back together until I've got to 355 custom firmware, but you know, you can do whatever you want really. So once it's been flashed, when you just literally turn it back on, now this is the case with all Nor models, whether it's Fats or Slims, it'll all happen the same way. Once you turn it back on, it'll bring you to connect the controller using a USB cable. It'll bring you back to safe mode, and then it'll ask you for an update of whatever version it's on. So as you can see, it's on 4.75, this PlayStation. It'll ask you for an update of that or higher. So what you want to do is, if you put your USB in with Ruggiero Downgrader on, Ruggiero 999 downgrader, press the start and select button, and then it will check through the update. Now some people will say you always have to put the USB in the right hand side. To be honest, with updates it doesn't really matter. If you're doing stuff that's factory service mode related, then yeah, you normally have to put it in the right hand side. But if you're doing updates, it doesn't really matter which port you put it in, it will read it in any one. So what it will do now is it'll install Ruggiero downgrader, or Ruggiero 999 downgrader. So it'll prepare to update, and that will mean that it copies the update to the hard drive. Once it's copied the update to the hard drive, it'll actually install. So preparing to update is copying it to the hard drive, and then the actual installing process is where it copies it from the hard drive to the PlayStation. Now sometimes you might get problems where packages don't run. You know, it might be Toggle QA that doesn't run, or you know, you might even just go to install a package and it'll say that there's no packages on the USB, even though you know that there is. That could be one of two things: either the Blu-ray ribbon on the Blu-ray drive isn't plugged into the motherboard properly, or the Blu-ray ribbon on the FATs that goes from the USB ports into the motherboard, that those Blu-ray ribbons may not be plugged in correctly. Another reason for it is the PlayStation gets backed up with updates after it's had so many updates, and it gets a little bit confused when it's trying to pull it from the hard drive, and in which case, like, it won't let you open packages, and when you run Toggle QA it will stay black screen. Best thing to do for this is to, if you go into recovery menu and then rebuild the database, then go to the XMB settings and quick format the hard drive, and then go back into recovery menu and restore the default settings. You have to do it in that order, and you have to do all three, and then once you've done those, it'll let you carry on. So once it's prepared to install its copy to the hard drive, it'll bring up system update, press the PS button, press the PS button on the controller, then it'll check for updates, and then it'll start to install. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the video, and then we'll come back once it's installed Ruggiero downgrader. So once the PS3 has installed Ruggiero downgrader and restarted, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to install package files, and then you're going to want to install Toggle QA. So ideally, when you put Ruggiero downgrader onto the USB, just put Toggle QA into the root of the USB. I will leave download links for everything that you'll need, so you'll find everything in the description. So install Toggle QA. Once that's installed, if you click X on it, the PS3 should go black screen, and then it will beep, and then it will restart. See, because the downgrader, the syscon is set to 999, so you'll only be able to install firmware of 999. So what Toggle QA does is it resets the syscon. So if you come across the settings and go down to the bottom, go to network settings, and then you want to press L1, R1, L2, R2, click the left stick in and down on the D-pad all at the same time. I will write the button combination in the description as well, and it will be in the written tutorial. So if you press all those buttons at the same time, you should get this menu pop up underneath, which is EDY Viewer, Debug Settings and Install Package Files. So you should get that pop up underneath Network Settings. If it does pop up, then that means that the Toggle QA has worked properly and the PS3 is now QA toggled. But if you don't get the menu, even after 100 times to try the button combination, then that means you'll need to run Toggle QA again. So once you've installed Toggle QA, once you've run Toggle QA and you've got your menu, you can just delete that because you're not going to need it again. A PS3 only needs to be toggled once in its lifetime. So now what you're going to want to do, take the Ruggiero downgrader USB out, and then you're going to want to put 355. Now with Nor consoles you can either go to 355 official firmware or you can go to 355 custom firmware. I'll put a link for 355 Cameo in the description. I always go Rigero Downgrader, Toggle QA, and then 355 Cameo. It's just force of habit. You can install any 355 custom firmware or official firmware, either one. So if you go to System Update and then Update via Storage Media and then 355 Cameo, and then it will start to copy the update. Now what you might get is first time it might say the data is corrupted. If it does say that first time, just install it again, and it will install on the second time. Don't worry about that, it does happen from time to time with certain PS3s. So once you've installed 355 official firmware or 355 Cameo, you can then go to any custom firmware you want. So if you've got any questions, just leave some comments in the description, or I'll leave my email address as well. You can drop me an email and I'll give you a hand if you need it. Alright, thanks for watching, and I hope you learnt how to do it.